Hey everyone, I'm Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central, and I am here today with editor Nicholas Monsour, who has worked with Jordan Peele on Us and most recently Nope, responsible for helping create the incredible spectacle of Nope. Nicholas, how are you? Thank you for joining me today.
I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
So, my first question before talking about Nope is how did you meet Jordan Peele and how did you start working with him? Because you've worked with him previously before Nope.
I have. It was a lot of luck, and thanks to a really wonderful editor that I worked with on a lot of my first jobs, named Neil Mahoney. Amazing guy and editor who passed away sadly.
Oh no.
What feels very recently, but he and I started on season one of Drunk History together.
Oh.
I had done a bunch of like informal editing and design work freelance for years and was bouncing between like serious documentaries, nonprofit work, and then my friends who were all doing comedy stuff. And I had
That's
helped.
the way of an editor. I do video editing freelance too, and I swear,
Yeah,
like that's how we do. Like we work with so many different in so many different sectors. I swear.
totally. And I think it works on a number of levels. I mean, you have to just economically, and then you also, because editing is, you have to have the half of it that is like analytical, and you're studying how all these different forms work. So kind of it's good, especially starting out, to probably try and get as much variety in as you can. So yeah, and Drunk History was a funny like mixture of documentary comedy and parody and education, and my good friend Jeremy Connor, I had helped him with some of the early internet ones. Oh, there's a cat. I see.
There's one of them. There she is. There
All
she
right, keep an
is.
eye on it. Keep an eye on it. So yeah, I had helped him with some of the early internet ones, and then they made it into a TV show. And I that's how I met Neil Mahoney. We sort of helped, he had done the pilot of Drunk History. We sort of helped then turn it into a series, and then he had before that worked with on Key and Peele and got called back because their last season they were doing a big double season of Key and Peele, twice as many sketches, and they needed more hands on deck. So he recommended me to that team, and they guess didn't have that many choices
Oh,
because I hadn't done much at that point on TV really. It was Drunk History was my first union job, so that was like I had barely been in the actual industry. Um, but I guess they liked what they saw in Drunk History, so then I worked on that show for a season. And Key and Peele was an amazing switch because up to then pretty much everything I'd worked on was total chaos.
okay.
So Key and Peele was like it was season four and a half or five, whatever you want to call it, and then and they were all like it was a very civil but very creative and fun environment, and you basically got to go in every day and like edit a different genre, which
So
was
cool.
amazing. And they were all incredibly talented people. And so that's where I first worked with Jordan he was a writer, producer, star of the show. And then I heard towards the end of the season that they were that the director of Key and Peele, Peter Atencio, and Jordan and Keegan were going to go and do a cat movie called Keanu. And I just threw my hat in the ring without really having any um, no studio feature experience. I just said, "You guys, like, I think we've had a lot of fun doing this season of Key and Peele. So, what do you say?" And they thought about it and convinced New Line to bring me along. So that was the first feature I did. Again, Jordan was the writer producer.
What a cool
Uh,
first feature, Keanu.
yeah, it
Keanu.
felt it felt right. I love that movie. I love the whole process. Again, it was very tough, very small budget in New Orleans in the dead of summer, and yeah, lots of challenges. And they were trying to do some really crazy stuff for that budget. So, you know, my first day on Keanu, I think I showed up in New Orleans, and I was like, "Where?" They're like, "Oh, do you want to go meet them? They're doing like the kitten tests." And I was like, yeah, I want to go see the kitten tests. And they were bringing in, they were all rescue cats, and they're bringing in kitten after kitten in front of the camera to see what the cutest possible kitten was. So
What a hard
I,
day.
I knew
What a
that would
hard
get.
day.
Well, it was actually kind of sad at the end to see all the ones that didn't get picked, but
You're
they
not,
were all
you
fine.
don't, you're not cute enough and don't cut it for
They all went to a rescue
Hollywood.
organization. I had worked for PETA for 3 years
Oh,
before
wow.
doing any TV stuff, so I was like, "What's happening to those cats?" But
Are they okay? Are they safe? Are
yeah,
you giving them
totally.
what? Moving from Keanu now to Nope, I mean, what has that been like? Again, with bigger budgets and, being able to
Yeah,
work on bigger projects, what has kind of that experience been like? Because now Nope, I mean, big budget, spectacle, as we keep saying, but it really is visual
yeah.
spectacle. I mean, what has that experience been like to work up to this kind of movie?
Well, Jordan very wisely and impressively has kind of leveled up each production that he's done,
Yeah,
has been kind of a new order of complexity and moving parts and people involved. So Us was a pretty big shift up for me in terms of, we're working with ILM. Every shot, almost every shot is a VFX shot because there's doubling actors in
yeah,
them. But because that didn't have, I mean, it had a bigger budget, but it was still like a horror budget, and so they had to be really regimented and planned out on that. And awesomely, because by that point Jordan knew me and knew that I'm a nerd. I love all aspects of the filmmaking, even though most of it I don't touch, but I'm interested, and it all informs me, and I
yeah,
like just being inundated with information. So being in the early production meetings on that was great, and even talking about the script before that. But I got to hear as they built the whole methodology of how they were going to do the doubling with, and
oh,
so I got, by the time we were cutting it, I was really prepared with all of their preparation of the storyboards, and they really shot it very carefully because they didn't have a lot of time, and they kind of, every shot is actually two shots they have to film.
yeah,
So that made it a really technical process, but then to get it all set up. But I learned even more that as Jordan gets more ambitious, he also likes to get more creative and
yeah,
investigate more, rather than, I think what can happen to a lot of people, not just directors, but when you work on something where there's that much money involved, there's that much sort of expectation for what it's going to be, um, and all the visual effects can kind of lock people creatively. But he somehow gets more creative with all of that. Um, so yeah, that was a really interesting step. And for me, like my background before I worked before I'd made any money doing any of this, I was doing projects just with friends and for fun, or in art school, um, or like I said, like nonprofits and things. But I was really mostly looking at things um, creatively and from a like a art perspective.
yeah,
And I loved all genres of film, but a lot of what I was really influenced by was experimental, independent film and video art and stuff like that.
very
So
cool.
I've really learned all the I've had to kind of consciously learn the Hollywood stuff as I started
Yeah,
working in it. And that's worked basically with the directors that I found, because, you know, on a feature, there's ever the more you do it and the more you work with people, the same people especially, but you know the craft level can keep going up, hopefully, and you don't have to worry about, you don't have to know how to do everything. Like when I started, I was like, you have to know how to shoot something, edit it, export it, do the visual effects, do the
oh yeah,
titles, do the sound, do the music. It's great to have that vocabulary, and also understand what those people are doing, but there are amazing people doing that work that you are working with. Um, and anyway, so yeah, it's been a lot of learning, but I've always all from the time I was, a teenager, just the features are sort of always the way my brain has wanted to work with
Yeah.
editing. And I've said it before, but I think like Key and Peele was really fun, and I think about it a lot, and we talk about it a lot while we're cutting because the way they wrote those sketches are sort of a lot of them feel like the best scene from a feature rather than they don't have like a sketch timing. They have their own timing.
Yeah.
Some of them are kind of slow, some of them are really action, but they're sort of like pulled from something else that doesn't actually exist. So,
Yeah.
which was fun because like you still are kind of thinking about the way feature films work rhythmically. And anyway,
Yeah. So you talked about how like you worked with, I mean, all the other departments, and you didn't have to know every single thing with working with editing, but with Nope, there's a lot. It's such a bigger scale, I think, than his previous two movies in terms of the visual effects, because I mean, we have a whole ass alien
yeah,
creature. So what was that like collaborating with the visual effects department in editing, and like what was that process like? Especially there is so many. I mean, there is so many
yeah.
alien scenes in this movie.
It was awesome. I mean, Jordan has been, he's set himself up with, he's built this company with his producers and friends, Monkey Paw. They're, they have such a um, kind of creative mind meld and sort of umbrella that they create around a project. And then Universal's lineage of monster movies, going back to the beginning
Yeah.
of movies, is legendary. And so I think it wasn't a case of uh, studio breathing down our neck or anything. They really, the studio lets Jordan and Monkey Paw do what they do, and they're there to bring the kind of support and perspective that they have a unique, their unique perspective on monster movies and movies. So it was awesome. I mean, Jordan and Ian picked a really great visual effects supervisor, Guillaume Rocheron, who has done incredible work in the past and was is just another incredibly creative collaborator who Jordan and him developed a whole language for how to talk about the clouds and the entity and
Yeah.
all of it. And uh, I just kind of absorbed it. A lot of it was sort of a fly on the wall for a lot of it, taking notes, thinking about what they were saying. But they all are really film lovers above all. The VFX team, and so they really respect Jordan and what he wants to do in the edit, and the edit really led the rest. Even though they're developing it the whole time, they know that as soon as they see a cut, they have to make it work with that cut. They can't say, "Oh, well, wait, we designed it to do this." Like he's always developing it, and in the pre-production, he's developing it on paper and with previs artists. But then in the edit, he's editing it, and it got complicated. It was a much bigger team. There, two assistant
Yeah.
editors, VFX editor, assistant VFX editor, and then VFX supervisor, and like VFX producer. All these people all in house to make sure that when something changed, it went through the whole pipeline, got to the right artists, and got back to us, and we could get it back in and look at it sort of with the goal being that when we're in the edit room, it feels as kind of fluid and easy as possible, even though it takes a lot of work to make it all happen.
Cool. And so I wanted to ask you about my favorite scene or sequence in this movie, and it's the jean jacket abduction scene at Jupiter's Claim, which is probably one of the scariest alien abduction movie like sequences I've seen.
That's great.
And I think, I mean, to me, the editing is part of why that sequence is so terrifying. And so I wanted to hear more about the process of you putting that together and creating this absolutely like jarring moment, like of action in Nope.
Mm. Well, thank you. That's good to hear that it had the intended effect. So I mean, yeah, there's a part of editing that is kind of um telepathic sounds really pretentious, but you have to kind of intuit what in however you think about actually like the nuts and bolts of editing, you have to translate little clues you're getting and try and into editing language and how your
Yeah.
hands and brain work. And some things Jordan was saying early on, and that I could tell from the way things were written in the script, and then the way they were talking in VFX meetings, I could kind of start to see this thing that Jordan was doing where, you know, the audience is a little bit ahead of these people in the stadium, and Jupe, you understand that something is going to go horribly wrong before they do. And there's a little bit of fun, a kind of macabre fun in seeing, this kind of little weird microcosm of America obliviously sitting there wanting to be entertained, but and we all know that it's not going to go very well. Draw whatever analogies you want to that, and then um, and then I could tell there was this thing with the on the page. It was there that there's this thing with the character of Jupe where because of what he's been through and his backstory of living through a kind of animal exploitation related trauma, that when he sees that this thing he thought he had control over, he doesn't, and the expression on his face, and that sort of, oh, I whoop, yeah, no, like
Oops.
sort of a clever girl moment like Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And uh all of those references that were in there, like from King Kong to then all the things that have referenced King Kong, like Jurassic Park or Close Encounters, and all these things that I could tell just from this sort of concept of the theme park presentation thing were in there. Um, and then one very early idea of Jordan's was try he just said one day, like, what if you put, like, 2 seconds of black after at the end of that shot, and that just seeing the effect that has, I said, oh, okay, I think I understand the style of this sequence now, because that's just like one little seed, but to me, I'm like, oh, I know that style, or I can imagine what that feels like to build to that, and then what it's like after. And so it often just takes one idea and then you can kind of flesh out the rest. So um yeah, but and that everything after a certain point, you're just supposed to go, what, like you're supposed to not expect every next shot, and it's so it's your job to sort of feel the rhythm, and then right when you don't expect it, do the cut, or right when you do, wait a little longer and then do, um
Yeah.
and then there were discoveries along the way. Yeah, I mean, they were evolving visually the creature the whole time,
Okay.
through discussing, they had a very solid idea going in, but they kept working on it the whole time. So
Yeah.
there's a shot on the in the inside where you sort of turn around and see what's in there for the first time. And um I think that was something that I grabbed and just tried at one point and was like, what about this? And they were like, ooh, that, has an interesting effect. And then, so that became a shot in that sequence. And then at some point they thought, let's keep going. Let's follow these people going up through the whole
Yeah.
process, the whole assembly line, or disassembly line. And, so then they went and shot that, and it kept growing and building, and then we tried more, and then I was like, no, that's too much, and then brought it back. So
Okay. Cool.
he's always, yeah, it's he set up this whole production, and I tried to set up the edit so that it's never we keep it fluid as long as possible, because he likes to keep writing the movie till basically it comes out.
Oh, really? Oh
Yeah, on this
God.
one, I mean, like I said, he wanted to, but it was very clear that was the deal. It was very clear. It was like, you
Yeah.
tell me when I can't, and otherwise, I'm going to keep going, because every time he watches it, he has a new revelation about it that is interesting, and I'm like, and you can't deny. You're like, yeah, totally, that's right. Let me figure out how to make that happen. So that's sort of how the whole production is built, is to make sure we're kind of as direct a conduit out of Jordan's head onto the screen as we can
Wow.
make it.
Wow. That's wild. But also good that that expectation is set. Like you guys know what you're getting into with that.
Yeah, and he's
But
not crazy. He know when we're
yeah.
like, you can't do that. He'd be like, okay, so how about this? And yeah, it works. It's a lot of
And
work, but we all know that it's for because it's we know that we're doing all this, going back over things and reinventing things the whole time, because every time he reinvents it, it gets better. So,
yeah. And so, were there any other sequences, scenes that you were especially proud of putting together? I mean, this whole movie has so many incredible moments, but was there a moment in particular that you edited together and you're like, hell yeah, I'm very proud of how this ended up?
yeah, well, okay, I have to give two like boilerplate answers. One is I don't know if that's the right term. So with two kind of just perfunctory answers. One is the only real thing one thing I've had to learn, especially working on bigger and bigger movies, is that if the filmmakers are happy at the end, then I did a good job. There may be a lot of things in there that I'm like, ooh, I think, but I'm not Jordan Peele, and I wouldn't, I would have a hard time believing myself going in and asking Universal for $100 million. I would have to do a lot of thinking beforehand about exactly why and what I was doing. So he's already done that. He knows, or whatever the budget ended up being. That's not an actual quote, but so because of that, there are, and then right. So the other part of that is that it also goes through a lot of hands after the edit. There's
Yeah.
there's the
Yeah.
composer, there's the color, there's the finishing the VFX, there's the sound mix,
Mhm.
all of that. The dialogue editor, there's like literally 20 or 30 people that work on it after the edit. So that also changes the way things end up feeling, and some of it, and that's again all under Jordan's feedback the whole time. So again, if he's happy with it and I've set him up to work with all his other collaborators, right? Great. So part of what I'm most proud of is like the stuff that I know Jordan likes the most, because I'm really trying to help him get his vision on screen.
Yeah.
I think when we were working on it, the Gordy sequence felt the most unique to have that much control and that kind of quality of the IMAX image and incredible visual effects team involved, and the research that went into it and all of that at that scale for such an unusual and disturbing idea, that was loaded with a lot of concepts that really, I was like, I don't, that I haven't seen explored very much.
Yeah.
Was that definitely felt really unique, and I think we were all kind of pinching ourselves working on that, even though the edit is very subtle there. I don't think it's very flashy editing. It's sort of, how do I make you feel like you're there the most? What's the
Yeah.
time that feels most intuitive to cut to little Jupe's face? When do you
Yeah.
need to see that? Okay, great. It's not, you don't overthink it. Don't get fancy. Just do what works here, because everything else is great. So that's sort of the work, craft answer. But uh I'd say, yeah, I like that motorcycle ride at the end was incredibly fun, and there was a lot of material. They shot that, they built this world for Nope up there. They built the ranch, they built the theme park, and they're geographically accurate in this valley.
Oh, wow.
So they filmed her ride the bike from the ranch to the theme park, but
Oh.
you can't have a 12-minute exciting chase scene at the end. There was a lot of digging for what, like, like so many options for the exact way the bike revs and the tire turns and the dust plume passes and all that.
Oh,
So I feel like, and that's a moment where the editor really, they're trusting you because they can't sit there and go through all the hours of the footage and all the angles and all the cameras. They're like, is that the best? And you're like, yeah. And they're like, okay. So, um, anyway, so I do like that section a lot
cool.
too.
That's
And we
amazing.
had tried a lot before it ended up with score. Part of the journey with Jordan is like we talk about music all the time, and we're trying. He often has a backup idea or a starting point, and he's like, "That
Mhm.
might be the final thing, but let's explore." And I'm always throwing stuff on, and he's throwing stuff on, and yeah, we tried a lot of things in that moment. And at one point, funnily enough, it was we were we were really vibing off Kate Bush, and then uh,
Oh
we had moved away from it, and we were like, yeah, and it's not quite right now that we see it in context. Well, it is fun to watch, but so yeah, at home you can throw running up the hill over the motorcycle section
and
and
that was
see
that was
what
that before the whole Stranger like it
it
blew up on
was. So, and
Stranger.
then
That's
and
amazing.
then like a month later, it was like Stranger Things made Kate Bush $1 billion. You're like that. See,
Yeah.
zeitgeist. It's real, everybody. Yeah,
Also, Kate Bush is coming back. I'm very excited for that. But
it's
anyway.
true. Also, 43-year-olds are in charge of everything right now, so it's not that surprising that they're pulling from all the stuff they loved. But yeah,
Fair enough. So are you a horror fan? Like are you a horror person?
I have to be careful with that answer because A, you could probably school me, and B, I uh, I don't know exactly what that means. So I think
Okay.
I'll say this: some of my favorite movies are horror movies.
Okay.
Good horror movies I love more than anything, and I think I'm always on the hunt for that. That said,
Okay.
I don't have a lot of patience for like stock horror, or I'm just not. I'm not into it enough that I can watch the same story over and over again or the same style over and over again. Whereas I think sci-fi, I can do that.
Oh, cool. Okay. I mean,
I
like
think
the thing
I
with
think
horror, I always like sci-fi horror and like thrillers to me are all the same in my head.
mm.
And but again, like I know you. Yeah.
No, and right, obviously the lines between them are not there sometimes at all. So
Yeah.
or fairly artificial. But in general, if something is vaguely called sci-fi, I will probably watch it. Doesn't matter how bad it is. Part of that is all that kind of like world building logic
Yeah.
stuff that's just sort of Virgo-y, and I like it. And then, but horror is always kind of, um, it's always in my favorite things, and there, so yeah. But again, like I said, I I've come around and sort of done a later life education in the Hollywood side of things. So a lot of stuff
Okay.
that I loved is maybe Hollywood adjacent to not at all like yeah, anyway, so maybe
What
more
kind of like
obscure.
what movies do you think are you talking about?
Well, I love like I love like Japanese ghost stories and demon stories.
Have you seen
Things like
Noroi the Curse?
yes, totally.
I just got a tattoo from that
Oh wow.
movie.
Nice.
I Japanese horrors and
Yeah.
like ghost stories are my favorite. So
Yeah, and I love like Kwai-Don and
oh yes.
Kuroneko and
Oh Kuroneko.
Onibaka, the like all amazing, and so those are an influence. And then I mean I think I grew up, I think like when I was like 18 I went, or 17, seeing Lost Highway.
Oh yeah.
I had liked David Lynch already, but that kind of turned it into a new thing where it's like, oh wow, like that's, I'd like to work on something like that or make something like that. So yeah, some Cronenberg I really love. And there's have you seen any have you seen the films of Lucille, will butcher her last name because I think I've only read it. Hadzihilovich. She's a French
No, I don't
Hungarian.
think I have.
Gaspar Noé's wife, and she co-writes his movies. But
Oh.
her films, she's made three: Innocence, Evolution, and Earwig.
Oh, Evolution.
Yeah,
Evolution is the one, yes. And then
the like
Earwig the
aquatic.
one, is Earwig the one with the frozen teeth?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, 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 yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
I love her movies, and I don't know if you call them horror or not, but
I
I
feel
th-
something like horror as a label is so fluid at this point, and I
for
love that
sure.
about it. And like, yeah, that
There's
just,
definitely some body horror elements to what she's doing.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
I didn't know
So
she was Gaspar Noé's wife.
yeah.
Hmm,
Well, actually, I don't even know if they're married. I know they co-write, and I think they're partners.
cool,
Yeah.
amazing.
Anyway,
Well,
a lot more, but
Nicholas,
yeah.
Nicholas, thank you so much for talking to me
Of course.
today about Nope, Jordan Peele, movies. This was incredible to chat with you about making this amazing movie.
Thank you for wanting to talk about it.